Sup, boys? Me and Anthony hanging out here at the fountain. So today's video is going to be a kind of a continuation of a couple of videos that we've already done, specifically going into the reaction system in this game and kind of talking about how all of this stuff works so that you can try to have a better understanding about what you're doing and when you're doing it so that you can kind of maximize the potential damage that you're able to output. So as a quick recap of the last video, we talked about a ton of elemental mastery stuff, but there was a couple of things that we kind of need to recap to bring over to this video. So we had a elemental source, which was the aura or the gauge element, which is kind of the whole purpose of today's video. Basically the very first element that gets applied to a target is going to be the aura element. Then we have the trigger element, which is the second element applied. As long as it's not the same element as the first and it is able to cause a reaction, it will cause a reaction. These are things like overload, superconduct, melt, vaporize, things like that. Next, we actually have internal cooldowns, which is roughly going to be a specified time depending on the source of the trigger and where it's coming from. There is a small cooldown that is specific to each source that the same destination can't receive a reaction from the same source before this internal cooldown expires. But we do have another term, which is kind of the entire purpose of this video, which is called the elemental reduction. Essentially, there are two ways for the aura element to expire from their target. Essentially time, there is a specified time where the aura element will just simply expire and you won't be able to do any reactions and you'll have to apply a new aura element onto that target. Or by a reaction, you can technically consume the element on the target and perform a reaction, which will in turn get rid of that aura element. So here's where the entire gauge unit theory comes in. Essentially, once we apply an aura element to an enemy, they are going to be associated with a number of gauges and a specific amount of time before those gauges will expire. So what we're looking at right here is each and every character. So we have Dilute, Klee, Amber, Bennett, Zhengling, Xinyan, all the way down through all of the elements, right? And then we actually have the number of units that each of their attacks that are elemental will apply to the target. So if we actually take a look at, let's look at Kaya. If we say that Kaya's elemental skill here, so he is going to apply 2 units of cryo, whether he presses his E or he holds his E, because there's not a difference in that particular skill. It's literally just going to apply 2 units of cryo. His elemental burst, on the other hand, is only going to apply 1 unit of cryo. But let's specifically talk about his skill for a second. The reason that 2 units is significant is because you can kind of think of this as there are 2 possible reactions to get, 1 for each unit that we have applied to the enemy. So for Kai's elemental skill, let's go apply cryo to an enemy really quick. So the reason that this is significant, if we actually hit with that elemental skill, you'll notice that the enemy does have the cryo applied to him. Now we can sit here and we can wait for this to go away. And because we actually have the units applied, you can see it does expire after a certain amount of time. Now, specifically for these units, the time that it actually takes to expire varies depending on how many units we actually have applied. If we just use something that applies 1 unit of any element actually is going to expire after 9.5 seconds. This one has the least amount of reactions possible, but gives you the most time to set up and do that reaction. Versus if we have a skill that applies 2 units of a specific element, both of those units will expire after 12 seconds. Or you could think of it as both units will expire after 6 seconds, one after the other. So you technically have 2 reactions that you can do here, but you only have 6 seconds to set that up. And lastly, we do have 1 unit in the game that is able to apply 4 units to an enemy. Beto is the only character that we currently know of that can do this. 4 units ends up doing a total duration of 16.8 seconds, although each unit specifically will expire after 4.2 seconds. So you have the least amount of time to set up the reactions, but you have the most reactions possible pending internal cooldowns with a 4U gauge. So again, you can kind of think of units as the total number of reactions that are possible with a specific skill. So for the extent of this video, we're going to be focusing on Superconduct and Overload as our main two elements in question here. Swirl, Crystallize, Electrocharged, those are a little bit different in how the system handles those. I'm actually going to do a completely separate video just for those. But specifically for this interaction, what we're going to do is focus kind of on Superconduct, and the exact same things happen with Overload as with Superconduct here. These are probably the most simple in terms of like setting up and performing the reactions. They don't have any kind of like special conditions to them like the other ones do. In theory, what we should have here, if we apply Kaya's elemental skill, is going to provide 2 units of cryo to this Hilitrol back here. You can see he's kind of just patiently waiting for me to pop my head up. And then we're going to use Lisa, and we're going to just do a normal attack. Lisa's normal attack, whether we do just a regular normal attack or a charge attack, is only going to apply 1 unit of Electro. So in theory, what this allows us to do, if Kaya is going to give us 2 separate units of cryo to perform reactions with, we should in theory be able to get 2 reactions out of Lisa, pending that the cooldowns don't mess us up. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to apply cryo with our elemental skill, and then we're going to use Lisa to apply 1 unit of Electro with our normal attack. So what this should do is yield us a Superconduct, but you see, even though he has cryo, we couldn't do another Superconduct on top of that. That's because the internal cooldown on Lisa doesn't allow us to have another reaction in the bank. So what we can do is if we apply cryo here, this, and that ends up giving us 2 full reactions. Now you'll notice that sometimes it won't show Superconduct twice. Oddly enough, the text actually has a cooldown, but you should still see a damage pop up even if you don't see an actual text that says Superconduct. So let's do this again here. We'll do this, we'll have that. So we can see here that whenever we apply cryo, because Kaya's elemental skill has 2 units worth of cryo, we're applying cryo to both of the Hilitrols at the same time. Once we actually hit the Superconduct with Lisa, you'll notice that the Superconduct only hits Hilitrol on the left, right? So that creates a Superconduct, and it actually consumes one of the gauges from Kaya's 2 units that he applied. Which is why, once we fast forward, you'll notice that after the reaction occurred, this cryo on Hilitrol on the left is getting ready to expire. It blinks until it expires and it goes away. But you'll notice that the Hilitrol on the right still is affected by the cryo because the 2 units that Kaya applied, neither of them had been consumed yet. So we are just waiting on the time expiration for it to fall off. Then we can see if we just keep going, eventually the cryo falls off there. Now in this next instance, you'll notice we apply cryo to both enemies, and we're going to use Beto's elemental skill, and we do get 2 separate Superconduct reactions that happen, 1 per enemy. So this kind of goes back to the internal cooldowns where the ICD basically is separate between the source and the destination. So as long as the source is being applied to multiple destinations, the internal cooldowns are specific to each destination. So it's not like Beto can only apply Superconduct, once every 60 frames or something like that. So we get 2 Superconducts there, and you'll notice both enemies now have both cryo and electro completely consumed. So this poses an interesting point. The trigger will always happen. As long as the aura element is there and able to be consumed, it will be consumed, even if the amount of units that you're applying ends up exceeding what is remaining. The reason that this is happening is because when we use Kaya's elemental skill, we have 2 cryo units there. By using Lisa's normal attack, we are actually removing 1 element of cryo because of the reaction Superconduct, and her specific normal attack is 1U. Therefore, we're removing a unit from Kaya's cryo, leaving only 1 unit left for another reaction, which that's the reason Beto can step in and perform another reaction with that 1 unit of cryo left with her elemental skill, leaving 0, which removes cryo from the enemy completely. That brings up that you can actually perform a reaction no matter how many units you are applying on top of what's left, what's remaining on an enemy. As long as there is at least some time left and you hit the reaction before time expires on that aura, you still will get a reaction. If you applied Lisa's normal attack as the Electro aura on an enemy and used Kaya's 2U elemental skill, it still would perform Superconduct. But because there's only one unit of Electro, that means there's only one reaction possible before that time expires. So you would end up removing the Electro altogether, and you end up missing out on an extra Superconduct. So order of operations very, very much matters here. So that's why on one enemy we were able to get extra Superconducts off, but the other enemy had the entire aura gauge consumed. Beto's elemental skill being 2U ends up consuming 2 units worth of reactions. It is also important to note that once a reaction occurs, once the trigger element is applied, that trigger element cannot be left on an enemy if there was a reaction that took place. Just because we perform Superconduct with Lisa, Lisa's not going to leave Electro on the table from that specific reaction. She would have to attack again to apply Electro to the enemy. Now, decay rates. This is where things are going to kind of get a little bit squirmy. So if we have a 1U element, we talked about that it's going to expire after 9.5. 2U element is going to expire every 6 seconds per each unit, so a total of 12 seconds. And 4U is 4.2 seconds or 16.8 seconds total for all 4 units. Now the reason that that's important to kind of keep in mind is because switching character animations, all of these things take up time to actually do your reactions. So for Beto, if we perform her elemental burst, we end up getting 4 possible reactions, but we must trigger the first reaction before that first unit expires after 4.2 seconds. So we have to kind of be quick. That is super important because in certain team comps, it's not going to be possible to take advantage of the entire gauge that you're applying. But fret not, there is a way to manipulate the amount of time that you have to perform reactions. So in theory, if you were to apply the same element twice, just for the sake of testing, we're going to apply 1 unit of Electro with Lisa, and then we're going to use our elemental skill with Beto. It's going to take the decay rate of the 1 unit, which would be 9.5 seconds, and it's going to multiply that by the gauges of the second hit that we perform with the same element. So since Beto's elemental skill is 2U, it ends up giving us 2 units worth of 9.5 decay rate, which is a lot more time to perform our reactions. So I'm going to do a charged attack here, hopefully, yep. And you'll see we're going to hit both of them. Now, they technically should keep this elemental, this aura here for 18 full seconds. No, 19 full seconds. And we could sit here and we could, lollygag around, do what we got to do. But essentially what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to have 19 seconds to perform our reactions. The reason that this is important is it gives us more time to set up our reactions, and certain teams can really utilize this by allowing yourself more time to switch and perform a skill, to switch to perform another reaction. Like, let's say you want to do Superconduct and Overload. Do you really have enough time if you apply 4.2 seconds worth of gauge? Do you? Now, all that's fine and dandy, but you actually have to be sort of careful because this does also work in the reverse direction as well. Let's say, for instance, we are going to use Beto's elemental skill, and then we turn around and we swap to Lisa and perform a normal attack. Well, what that does is it actually sets up 2 units worth of Electro at their decay rate, which is 6 seconds, and then it applies the 1 unit of Electro with Lisa. So what we end up getting is the decay rate from our first skill and the units from our second skill, meaning we just missed out on 3.5 seconds worth of reaction time just from switching in the wrong order. So all of that actually applies to both overload and superconduct. Like I said, swirl, crystallize, and electrocharge are a little bit more in depth, and we'll need to talk a little bit more about them. We're going to do that in a separate video just because this video is already going to be pretty long. But I do really want to quickly talk about melt and vaporize because they're also pretty unique in the way that they work. Essentially, if you go back to the previous video, you may remember that melt and vaporize have a weak and a strong element, and the order of application actually applies. The way that gauges work is also true for that. So if we actually want to melt, if we end up using the strong element for the melt reaction, we end up causing double the amount of gauge to be consumed. So the way that we're going to show this is we're going to apply cryo, and then we're going to let Guba perform the melt. Now, Guba has 1 unit of pyro that he applies to an enemy. Even though Kaya applies 2 units of cryo, when Guba performs the melt reaction, because fire is strong to cryo, it ends up consuming the entire gauge from Kaya's elemental skill because it ends up consuming 2 units instead of just 1. And on the flip side, it also works in the opposite direction as well. Bennett's elemental skill is 2U, Kaya's elemental skill is 2U, but if we perform melt with it, we should still have pyro left after the fact with this. So I need him not to be in, yeah, there we go. So you can see melt there, and he still has pyro on him because it ends up only consuming half the gauge if we do it the opposite direction. So this also works with Vaporize as well. When we stance change with Child, you may remember that he's going to apply 2 units of Hydro, and if we tried to Vaporize with Bennett, it's only going to consume 1 of the gauges instead of both of the gauges. So let's lure this guy over here. Come on, get out of the grass because that's going to mess things up. We'll do this and that, and you'll see he still has Hydro on him. So why is that important? Well, the order of operation matters even more so for melt and vaporize because you could, in theory, get away with doing extra melt damages from different sources or pending internal cooldowns don't mess you up. Of course, the 2 times damage is going to be looking better in general, but overall, like for Ganyu's bloom and her charge shot only do 1U worth of cryo. But if I have Bennett who uses a 2U elemental skill, if that gives me 12 seconds worth of reactions, in theory with Ganyu, I could end up getting 4 separate melts off with her. Because it's going to consume half of the gauge that it normally would, I end up getting, instead of 1U per charge shot and bloom, and because they're different targets, in theory, it should work to where they get both melts should happen. What you end up getting is 2 melts per gauge, and because I can do that twice because of Bennett's elemental skill, I end up getting 4 occurrences of melt before I have to reapply the pyro. If I end up doing 4 occurrences of melt at 1.5 times damage versus 1 at 2 times the amount of damage, just throwing that out that it is a possible scenario. But that's pretty much going to be the gist of it today, guys. This is kind of a heavy topic, and it's pretty theory crafty, kind of like in nature. Of course, this is our current understanding of this system, and it possibly could change in the future. We may have a better understanding after this video is long gone and been released for a little while. But to our current knowledge, this is what we currently do believe is the way that reactions are set up and how they are timed, and it's kind of like the backbone of the reaction system in total. So hopefully, by knowing some of this stuff, you will be able to apply this to your specific team comps and allow yourself either more time to do these reactions. Hopefully, this allows you to not end up hindering yourself and missing out on reactions because you're applying the aura element on top of the same aura element and ending up rewriting the amount of time that you have per unit and stuff like that. There is a ton of information here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave everything that I used for this specific video down in the description. I highly encourage you to go through and read a lot of this information. Hopefully it will sink in a little bit better, and you can then in turn use this for your own liking. So from here, we are going to continue on for the crystallize, swirl, and electrocharge video. That is also going to be kind of a big feat, because those three also work very differently from melt, vaporize, and superconduct and overload. And then shattered, it seems to be one of the ones that has like very little research done on it. I'm not 100% sure how it ends up fitting in, because shattered is not necessarily, it's a reaction, but it's a reaction between a heavy attack and a frozen enemy. So if I'm not mistaken, all heavy attacks are just going to remove the instance of frozen. So just to test this really quick, come here, big boy. Come here, big boy. Hey, don't ignore me. That's what I thought. So we're gonna use Kaya to apply 2 units of cryo here, and then boom. Yep, see it just instantly removes the cryo there. So this doesn't really apply nearly as much as the other reactions do. Yeah, it just removes it, period. So yeah, but anyways, shattered is also one of those that's it's a little different as well, but there's not a whole lot of talking points on it. I guess I do at least need to throw it into the other video, though. I'll make a note of that. But anyways, that's pretty much going to be it, guys. Of course, this is all a work in progress. This is literally me relaying the information that I'm finding out to you and hoping that it makes some sense. If you do have any questions, you can leave a comment down below. I highly encourage you to go check out the sources in the description, though, because they are the ones that come up with this theory. But altogether, you should have a link to the Kachink's main theory crafting library, which is going to have the larger write-up for this exact theory. I'm going to leave the internal cooldown database in the description, and I'm going to leave the elemental gauges database in the description. But nonetheless, thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully your mind is a little bit blown, but not completely burnt out, because at the end of the day, all this is literally just for extra knowledge, because knowledge is power. See you guys. Major shout out to Cherry Blue, who is a YouTube member.